Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today it is once again that time where we do have a challenge tournament. In this case, it is Ice Golem with only Dark Elves. Now, normally I will have released this video the day before it begins, but in this case I'm running a little bit behind schedule, apologies for that, but we get to see the rewards and that's the benefit here. So unfortunately, there is no Void Shard this go around at the 2100 points. Instead, it is a 5-star chicken. However, there is also the Ancient Shard here at 1750, which could entice some of you. However, the primary goal here is if you have a relatively easy group, like I kind of do have here, then you have a great opportunity to get some Relentless gear. You can get 6 pieces of 6-star epic or 6 pieces of 5-star epic if you take one of the top 2 spots. And of course, you can also get the rare gear as well if you take 3rd or 4th. Now, Ice Golem is generally regarded as the least popular dungeon. I'm not one who shares that opinion because I really do value the reflex set and I want it on like 4 or 5 more of my champions. But nonetheless, it is generally regarded as the least popular, which means players are even less likely to participate in a tournament that is restricted and Ice Golem at the same time. As usual for these tournaments, I do recommend dropping down to stage 20 to make it easier on yourself. I don't think there's an HP burner in the entire faction for Dark Elves. I could be wrong, someone fact check me. HP burn is required for hard mode, so I don't think that's the best option for something like this. If you can put together a team and you can do stage 24, stage 25, then feel free, but majority of folks, I would recommend staying with stage 20 or even dropping down to stage 16. It's Void Affinity. You can basically use whichever champions you have and it'll be a lot easier. So the team I have for you guys today is as such. We have Mithrala, Lydia, Ruel the Huntmaster, Dark Kale, and Painkeeper. Last night I did a good amount of experimentation trying to come up with the fastest team that was also relatively successful and trading in a few things here and there. This is eventually the team that I settled on that had the most consistent and successful clears. So to break down the rules here, we do have Mithrala, who's providing our buffs and some debuffs. She is a Hexer, powering up our Ruel the Huntmaster, who is going to be the wave nuker for this composition. We have Lydia, who's our debuffer, but also she has the passive where she can block the revival on some of the minions on the boss phase. We have Dark Kale as our win condition, also our decrease attack champion. So he's going to be poisoning the boss and whittling him down with his A1 to activate the poisons. And lastly, we do have Painkeeper, who is there to as the little baby reset to help speed up the waves. So this team can take anywhere between about 1.5 minutes to 2.5 minutes, depending on the RNG of the poisons landing on the boss and being activated by Dark Kale, and when Lydia chooses to block the revive of the minions. So I'm going to go ahead and run it for you guys so you can see it in action. As I mentioned earlier, the star of the waves is Ruel the Huntmaster, who gets powered up by the Hex, so we'll get to see him nuke the waves. So we lead off with Lydia as our debuffer, Mithrala putting the increased attack and Hex out, and Ruel should be able to one-shot the wave. Since we don't have the full reset of like a Renegade or a Kymar, I do let some of them use their abilities prior to the baby reset from the Painkeeper. But once she does that, we're ready to go again. Lydia debuffs, Mithrala buffs and debuffs as well, and Ruel should once again one-shot wave 2. So there you go, first of the 2 waves done in less than 30 seconds. So now we get to the boss phase where Dark Kale starts to put out the poisons, and on his second turn as well, we'll start to get the decrease attack. So in this phase, I do let them pretty much have full reign on their abilities. So Painkeeper is going to keep resetting every once in a while. Ruel is going to be able to AoE nuke some of the minions down. And Lydia hopefully will block the passive, or block the revive with her passive. And we won't get too many revivals of the mobs. So that's where the RNG can come into play. Also, Dark Kale popping poisons is a huge aspect of the RNG as well. So it looks like we got the first revive there blocked by Lydia and a little bit of freezes. The freezes are also an aspect of RNG. So depending on who and how they get frozen, they might lose some turns. There you go. Dark Kale got frozen and they got instantly re-revived, which is unfortunate. The good thing about Mithrala is that she does have a cleanse, so you can purge some of the freezes, but she does not have block debuffs, so you can't block the freezes. So that would be nice. Ooh, big smack there. Well, we lived, and that is the power of decrease attack. So when the both minions are up and he does counterattack, for those who don't know, he does ignore all of your defense, but with enough buffs up there with the shield from Mithrala and decrease attack on the boss, increase defense, strengthen, etc. So we're able to survive, and Painkeeper does have a little bit of a heal as well, so she can kind of top us up a little bit on HP. See another counterattack. That should be the final threshold for his health, and so he should take a turn. I'll get really, really low. I thought he was going to die. But yeah, a little over 2 minutes there, 2:15 for this run. As usual, these videos are not meant for you guys to necessarily copy my exact team, but to inspire you to use the champions that you have in a similar fashion. So with that, I'm going to share the builds of the champions that I used today for this team. For starters, we do have my Arena Mithrala, which a lot of you have seen many, many times, but she does have 57,000 HP, just under 4,000 defense, 261 on the speed, 200 resistance, and 575 on the accuracy. Built in an untouchable perception set again for the arena. Next, I have my Demon Lord clan boss Lydia, who's in resist, perception, and speed, kind of a smattering of gear. Pretty tanky, 56k on the HP, almost 3,500 on the defense, 269 speed, which is very precise, 41 on the resistance, and 359 on the accuracy. Next, the star of the waves himself, Ruel the Huntmaster, who's in a lethal and perception set. His total stats are 5,000 on the attack, 211 on the speed, 99 unfortunately on the crit rate, 197 on the crit damage, and 188 on the accuracy. Next, we do have my Relentless build for Dark Kael. His stats are 44,000 on the HP, 2,600 on the attack and the defense, 241 on the speed, full crit rate for the A2 to actually extend debuffs, and 382 on the accuracy. And lastly, we have my barely built Painkeeper here in a shield set. It's not really useful for this fight in particular, but that's the gear that I have her in. And she's 5-star, so not even maxed out, 43 or almost 44k on the HP, 200 on the speed, and a little bit of resistance. And of course, we are going to talk about some honorable mentions or alternatives that you could use in your team if you have them. So this time around, I'm actually going to change up the format a little bit, and so we're going to put these champions in categories. If you prefer this format, then let me know in the comment section down below. So let's start with the nukers. Of course, my nuker choice for this fight was Ruel the Huntmaster because he pairs well with Mithrala for the Hex. You could also use Ray. She hits very, very hard, and she has a chance to freeze, so a little bit of CC on the waves. There's also Foley, who does have a chance to block revive on the A3, and I did test him a few times, but as you'd expect, it's relatively inconsistent, and you do also have Lydia, so it can be somewhat redundant on the blocking of the revives. In a similar vein, you do also have Xavi, who can also block revive on the minions. However, her ability is slightly more powerful with a Poisoner, which is the next category we'll get into. Marinix is another nuker, and she pairs well with Mithrala for the hexes as well, but she can also place hex herself, and she does a little bit of bonus stuff when hex is out there. Ultan of the Shell does have an AoE sleep in his kit, so it can be a little bit of CC, but he does also hit relatively hard. For epics, we do have Durandil, who I've heard is a relatively high damage nuker for an epic, and you also have Luria, who can block revive with her freeze ability on the A2. It's also worth mentioning that Xavi and Marinix are force affinity, which is bad for stage 20, but if you're doing a lower stage or a higher stage, you can potentially take advantage of them as your AoE nuker. For the Poisoner category, you do have Noct the Paralyzer, who has an AoE sleep that places poisons, as well as places more poisons once they wake up. You do have the new champion, Supreme Kael, who's actually guaranteed going on right now, who has an AoE poison that cannot be resisted. Of course, you have the Dark Kael, who I featured, but of course, your OG starter, if you chose him, Kael does also have poisons as well, and if you're somewhat more in the early game, he can still be your AoE nuker as well as your Poisoner for some of the earlier stages of Ice Golem. For debuffers, Lydia is the prime choice, but if you do have a Ghostborn, you do get the advantage of decreased defense AoE that cannot be resisted, meaning that it will always land and you don't have the 3% chance to get resisted. You do also have the option of Madame Ceres if that's one of your arena debuffers. It's on a 4-turn cooldown, but you do get both decreased defense and decreased attack, and decreased attack is very useful for keeping your champions alive. For the supports, if you're lucky enough to have her, you can use Blind Seer as your reviver in case people die if you build a relatively tanky, high HP, because the boss might ignore some defense, but she does also have the block debuffs and a shield, so she can prevent your team from getting frozen. Of course, we also have Visix the Embowed, daily login champion, who can be your provoker, CC for the waves if they're causing you trouble, but also decrease speed as well as ally protection, so she can kind of take the brunt of the Ice Golem's hit if you want to be able to sacrifice her and revive her as needed. Most of you won't have her, but it's worth mentioning that Tremaria does have an AoE stun if you need that for the CC on the waves. Coming down to the epics, we do have Captain Tamila, who has ally protection just like Visix, as well as increased defense to kind of help you take a little bit less damage during the waves and or during the boss, when the minions are dead at least. You have Kaden, who can be a I think a 2-person revival, or 2-person reviver, so he can pick up some of your teams or some of your team members if they go down. You have Rian the Conjurer, who can be, again, single target revive, but she can also strip some buffs in case you're dealing with Seeker waves or something like that, where they place buffs on themselves. And of course, it's worth mentioning Sylar, who's great in a stun set, can be your CC champion as well as your speed manipulation champion to help you power through the waves. And lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't honorably mention Coldheart, who can be relatively strong for this dungeon. However, her Heartseeker will definitely go on the minions and potentially not on the boss, or it might go on the boss when you don't want it to, and you might one-shot your entire team. So you can use her. She is powerful for taking on the boss if you find some way to reliably block revive on the minions, and then she can just kind of power the boss down. Otherwise, I don't recommend using her because she adds a lot of potentially bad RNG to your run, where she can easily be the reason that your entire team wipes. So that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know down in the comment section below if you guys have a relatively easy group and what team you're going to be using to blast through this dungeon and hopefully score some sweet Relentless gear. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to drop a like down below. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, then be sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching and have a good one.